changes can manifest as part of unresolved trauma. So you have these different poles of where trauma can come out in that way. There is a stigma that exists in seeking care. Everybody always thinks it's not going to happen to me. In general, we all suffer. And how do we build resilience? I think we do that through, if someone can't tell me at all what they're feeling in their body, that tells me. That's why I love EMDR so much. We're not going in there and like taking the memory out and throwing it away down to a zero. Our bodies were meant to be moved. I knew that just sitting and talking about trauma only to bring in the mind-body approach takes it to that next level. It's not so much what is the trauma that affects our kids. The path to acceptance is through.
Today's conversation is one of depth, courage, and radical self-compassion. I'm honored to be joined by Caitlin Billings, licensed clinical social worker, author, and mental health advocate, whose work centers around healing through the lens of acceptance. Caitlin brings both professional insight and lived experience to the table, offering a deeply human perspective on what it truly means to embrace ourselves. In a world that often pushes us to fix, change, or hide what we're feeling, Caitlin invites us to lean in, to accept what it is, and the first step toward what can be. This is a conversation about authenticity, healing, and finding peace in the present moment. Take a listen. Thanks for your interest in sticking around to watch or listen to my podcast, dedicated to providing tools and resources to help you claim and live your best life. If you're loving these conversations, make sure you hit that bell to subscribe or follow and never miss an episode of the Chris Senise Podcast. Don't forget to tap the like and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration today. Let's grow this community of curious, driven minds together. Welcome to this week's episode of the Chris Senise Podcast. I am really looking forward to today's conversation with the very courageous Caitlin Billings. I really want to commend you for bringing humanity to your profession, and really humanizing what it is about to be in that profession. So thank you for that. I think the world needs to know about it. And you've put it out there, right? You've got your book, In Our Blood. But I just wanted to say that because I think it's an important thing to put out there. Can you tell us a little more?
Well, I have been in the social work field, social work, psychology, all of that kind of in the same genre, for about almost 20 years now. And shortly after I graduated from my graduate program, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And that really threw me because just of the way that I am and who I thought I was. I thought I had everything all figured out. And, my clients have disorders, not me. And so it was a very humbling process to go through. And it's really been a journey of, as we all go on journeys of self-discovery. This happens to be mine. I feel like I'm in a different place than when I wrote the book. And the book I wrote over a decade, so that was its own journey. But I thank you for saying I'm courageous. It had to be done. I had to speak the truth because I think a lot of us in this profession feel the same pressure to quote unquote have it all together or be perfect or know all the coping skills and use them all the time and never have a problem. And there is a lot of stigma. So I want to be a professional who is speaking out and being like, hey, me too.
Advocating.
I'm human too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in part why I wrote the book, and then some other things happened along the way that couldn't not be in the book. So, but that was the origin of it. The reason I did that.
And just from personal experience, I believe no matter what situation someone is in, whether they have a condition or they don't, you've talked about over time, our trauma grows because we get older, we have more experiences. So I'm a big advocate for, psychotherapy should just be a part of everyone's life because we have those experiences and we're not necessarily always equipped to handle that, right? How would you know if, this hasn't been your life's work? But I think it puts you in an even better position as a therapist, having the experience, having the diagnosis to recognize things and even be able to say, this is not textbook. I really, really understand this condition specifically. Would you agree with that?
I specialize more in working with trauma, of which I have my own, and we all do. Sure. I think if I were to primarily be working with just bipolar disorder, things could get too narrow. But I do have clients who come in often newly diagnosed, and I feel like I can offer a deep empathy to what that's like. It's very jarring. It's often there's a hospitalization correlated with it. There's medications that nobody's ever heard of. It's not like getting a depression diagnosis. And so I do feel that when I encounter those clients, or when those clients come to me, I am equipped, I think, maybe differently than someone who hasn't been through it. Although I would say that I have a lot of faith in my fellow therapists for, if that's someone's jam and that's someone's vibe, like that's what they're doing. They're working with people with bipolar.
One of the things that I'm really hoping to address as part of my podcast, again, not a therapist, not a psychologist, but very interested in really just living our best lives, is connecting the mind with our physiology. And you do a lot of work in that area, through, working with clients or patients, I'm not sure how you refer to them as, but just recognizing the effects that trauma has on the body, and overall illness. How did you fall into that specifically? And can you explain what that treatment is like?
In my undergraduate work, I was a dance and theater major. And I did a lot of my own healing at that time by using movement and what we call authentic movement, and then creative outlets of creating dances. And I was in my early 20s. It was a time of great creativity, but I think I learned something very, very important even back then, that that the trauma lives in the body, and the way that we can move trauma and release trauma and transform trauma is through the body. So that's something I like I said, I learned very early, and then came back around to it when I was working with survivors of domestic violence. And I had the opportunity to do an EMDR training. And EMDR is a mind-body approach to facilitating the recovery and desensitization of trauma in someone's psyche. And what I found was this glorious reconnection for me of like, yes, it's about the body. It's about the body. And so since then I do EMDR as a therapist. I talk a lot with my clients about just like really like the very, very, very basics of, what are we using our five senses for? How can we use them to our benefit, right? Is like, how can you create comfort and self-soothing through scent, sight, sound, taste, touch. And then the deeper work beyond that. But, for many people, if trauma is really acute, that's where they're at, is they just need to get grounded in their body. And the deeper EMDR or somatic therapy or whatever it is comes later.
What I'm hoping is to bring this to light to those who are completely unaware of this type of therapy, because you've talked about how we all have traumas, right? No one has a perfect childhood. No one has a perfect adulthood. We're
Right.
constantly having experiences, and I see it a lot just within family or friend groups or what have you. I do see in my own experience as well the connection of the mind and the body, being, how stressful times have either caused me to gain weight, lose weight, not feel well in my body, and not understanding the power that the mind has over our body. And I think this is it does not sound to me as the most traditional way of therapy, even though in your world it probably is like, yeah, Chris, this exists. Of course it exists, but it's not something that I think people might recognize as a traditional form of therapy. I think it's helpful, especially for people who are experiencing physical ailments, not just emotional ones, because it does play out in your body. How would that happen? Like, what might people experience depending, or just what might they experience, right? Because I think it's different for everyone, correct?
Yeah, like how does trauma show up in the body?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can show up in a lot of ways. It can show up in fatigue. That's a really common one. Just like, I am so tired, I don't know why I'm so tired. Tension, like full body tension. I don't know why I can't relax, but I just can't. I can't let anything go. I'm always clenched. Changes in, so we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, and changes therein can manifest as part of unresolved trauma. And so what do I mean by that? So that might look like elevated heart rate or respiration. I don't know why, but my heart rate is just going really, really fast. It just started out of nowhere and I can't get it to stop. And there's no, medical reason for it. Or I just can't slow my breathing. So that's more of a fight or flight response. And then you also have more of a depressive response, the fatigue, the no motivation to do anything, just it's hard to even get out and maybe take a short walk. Like, that is overwhelming. Going to work is overwhelming. Anything. So you have these different poles of where trauma can come out in that way. Nightmares, I see that a lot. Nightmares, people coming in and saying, I've been having a series of nightmares. I don't remember them, but here's how I feel when I wake up. So that can show up quite a bit. Yeah, I would say those are the things that come to mind.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that there's certain people in my circle, for example, that don't feel well and say things like, I go to the doctor and they can't find anything. I think it might be this, and then do the WebMD route of what could it possibly be. Honestly, I always say go to therapy, because I just really, I have a lot of faith in how effective that can be to sit and talk to someone. And, even in my own experience, I've changed therapists over years. I've had them for long periods of time for the most part. And then changed, when I felt that there was either something more that I was needing. I think that's healthy. I think that's okay to do.
Yeah.
I've even said it, hey, I think, we've capped out here. I might need somebody else. And I had them refer me to that somebody else because, again, I think it's a lifelong experience to be doing that and just unpacking some of the feelings that we store in our bodies and in our minds, because I do believe it can prevent us from moving forward. And in my life, it's worked out. I think I've been pretty successful, but I've put that kind of work in. But I know people have to be ready for that. And they have to be ready to receive that level of care. What advice would you give someone who perhaps needs the care and isn't seeking it?
I would say that it's, first of all, there is a stigma that exists in seeking care. And so just to like normalize that and say, like, I get it. Like, it's not easy. It is not easy to say, okay, I think I need this thing that a lot of people sneer at, or a lot of people look down on people who get that thing, right? Sure. So just to normalize that, but then to say, there's no commitment, just as you might look for the right doctor that fits your needs, you can do that with a therapist as well, and look for the right therapist that fits your needs. Any good therapist will make sure that there's been medical clearance. So, if you go to a therapist and say, I don't know what's wrong with me, expect them to say, let's get you cleared by your doctor first. If doctor's like, yep, everything looks good, then I would suggest there be being open to an exploration of what might be causing this. And it might surprise you what might be causing it.
Right. Thank you for that, because I agree with you that it needs to be destigmatized, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
And there just needs to be an openness to it. In your own experience, you've talked about that it took you 10 years to write your book. And initially they started as journal entries, is that correct? And then you joined a writing group. Would you say that writing group was also a support system for you?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And but it was such a lovely adjacent support, because nobody there was a therapist. They were all writers. So their support was of my creative process.
Right.
So it actually gave me some distance from the content sometimes. But yes, and in fact, I've this is new, but I'm starting a new writing project. And I just rejoined my writing group from the last one, because it's so vital to me and to kind of just how I function in the world. I need that creative support. I think we all do. However we find it, however, we receive it.
Right. And the reason I bring that up is because I believe support systems don't necessarily need to be, your psychotherapist. I think having the right people around you supporting you in whatever it is, because, I agree that journaling, writing is a great outlet. I mean, I'm a songwriter, so that is how I do it. And it's interesting because as a songwriter, you're not always writing in the first person. I could be writing a song about someone else's experience. I might say I in the song, or my, or me, but it's truly someone else's experience. And I can live through that as well. I think, the more people the more experiences you hear about. I remember for a long time being like, oh my God, my family's
so dysfunctional until you start meeting other people and you're like, they're all dysfunctional. Okay, it's not just my family. It's your own personal experience. But again, you learn that in being with other people and talking about your own experiences. But I think it's lovely that you had a support system outside of psychotherapy and doctors and that type of thing. And, I think it's good to encourage people to, move outside of those, what you would expect would be the best way to go about exploring your own experiences. Tell us a little more about the book, though. I'm curious.
The book? Which book?
In our blood.
In Our Blood.
So
okay.
You're currently working on a new one,
Yes.
right? Wait, before we go into In Our Blood, because I think it's an interesting topic as well, because we touched on your first book taking about 10 years to write, and that part of why it took so long was because you continued to have more experiences, correct?
Correct.
And to write a memoir, if this was, how long ago did you start writing it?
2011.
Okay, so still a young person to be writing a memoir, so I could understand how it would take a little long, if we want to call it long, to write a memoir. But explain a little bit about the experiences in that book.
In that
and
book,
what led you to that. Yeah.
Okay, so I have some trauma history that like I said, I did this dance program in college, and I felt like I'd really resolved a lot of it. And then in 2010, I was unexpectedly held up at gunpoint and developed. I was fine. I got away from the assailant, but unfortunately, I developed PTSD from that experience. And what happened was kind of a bunch of things happened. One is that I suddenly felt like the trauma that I had resolved previously all got kind of cracked wide open again. So I suddenly, all the trauma that I thought was closed up is suddenly now open and feels like a gaping wound. And then also I was put on an antidepressant, and the antidepressant unfortunately turned on the bipolarity in my brain. And I had a really extreme response to the antidepressant, and I ended up in the hospital. So all of that came from this random, I can't even call it a mugging, because I don't know if maybe the person wanted something, but I didn't have anything with me, so other than my dog. So that is what I started journaling about originally, was the holdup and the hospitalization, because both of those things were very traumatic. I had never experienced either of those things. And then the bipolar diagnosis came, and I was very ambivalent about whether or not I believed it, and I was on again, off again with medication for years. And that unfortunately just made things worse. And what I know now, and what I tell people now, is that bipolar disorder, the earlier you can be medication adherent, the better outcome for the disorder. The longer someone with bipolar goes unmedicated, the more vulnerable their brain becomes, and the more prone they are to further and further intense episodes. I didn't know that. I wish somebody had just told me that. Although maybe, I don't know, I probably would have been like, well, I don't have bipolar, so it doesn't matter. Once I finally became medication adherent, and I now, work with my doctors, I don't just go off my medication and don't tell anybody like I used to. Things really evened out, and I, quote unquote, got better. whatever that means. While that process was happening, my eldest child was also going through their own mental health struggles. And so it was this, and that's why the book is called In Our Blood, because there's a parallel between mother and child of our trauma journeys as well as our mental health journeys, kind of paralleling each other. Although they are very different. And the book ultimately is about acceptance, because I believe, for me anyway, acceptance was the key to freedom from what felt like a prison and a life sentence of awfulness, which it really hasn't been. And I've been able to carve out a way of life where I feel like I'm really solid. Like, I feel overall really, really good. And I'm excited about, the new directions that my career is going. And my kid is in this really like great theater program and is going to be graduating from college next year. And so things are going really, really well.
Right. That's great to hear. Congratulations on that, because, we don't want to take full credit as parents for how our children turn out, but we have a little bit to do with it. And I think that's excellent. And so he's kind of a theater kid, just like you were, because you were a theater kid, right?
I was a theater kid too. Yes.
That's awesome. One of my kids, my son, he's also a musician. So there's a lot of that goes into that. And my daughter's not, but she loves music and she's creative in many different ways. So they've followed some traditional paths. She's a teacher and he studied psychology. He's very interested in humanity, as well, as he calls it. We call it that. But yeah, they continue to be creative. So I think having an outlet is amazing. Has it worked out for him as well? I mean, does that outlet? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He has blossomed. I mean, and so talented. Like, we just went and saw the program just put on A Winter's Tale by Shakespeare.
Yes.
And my kid had a big part, and it was like not a stumble, like just
Amazing.
Spoke it beautifully. And I was really, really impressed.
Yeah.
So,
there's just something super special about, the creative soul, I think.
Yes.
I don't know. I just think being creative is such an important part of life. And I actually met someone recently who we were talking about what we did and mentioned that, I don't really listen to music. I don't like music. And I'm like, come on, really? But, to each his own, right? Everybody's got, their interests, and, I'm not going to judge or criticize, but I was just like, because it's so important to me. Music is, it's like everything to me, and it's so therapeutic. The process of writing, composing, performing, it's so great, and you learn so many things about yourself. What creative things do you do now?
I constantly want to be learning something, and so
Me too.
recently I joined an online platform for therapeutic use of ketamine. And so I'm going to be starting to implement that into my practice once I've done the online training and all of that. So that's something that I never thought I would do, but I had a client who had really positive outcomes with ketamine, and it just got me really interested. So training, lots of that kind of stuff.
New things, I feel like I'm a student of life as well. I think I thrive best when I'm learning new things. 6 months ago, I was like, I think a podcast would be good, and had absolutely no idea how to start or what, other than studying it, right, and figuring out how you would do it. And clearly there are a lot of opportunities to learn with, the internet and stuff. But, I think if I'm learning, I'm thriving, and it's the same for you, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a really good place for me to be. Tell us about the next book. What's going on? What's that one about?
So I wanted to do something very narrow in scope.
Okay.
I like the idea of writing deep into one specific topic.
Okay.
So my idea and what I've started working on is like a journal for young survivors of sexual abuse.
Okay.
Young adult survivors of sexual abuse. And so it's a combination of using some of my own experiences, almost as love letters to those who might want to use this journal for their own recovery and exploration, self-exploration, healing. So I've rejoined my writing group, and they're going to be helping me do this. But this I do not plan to work on for 10 years. It feels like a very doable project that I'm really excited about.
Well, the first one's the hardest, right?
Yes.
And and there was a lot to unpack. I mean, it was a memoir. And it was broad, right? Because our lives can be broad. But going into that, I really, again, commend you. You're a very interesting person, but I really commend you for putting yourself out there the way that you have. And we touched on it a little earlier, but you talk about acceptance so much. And I think being kind to ourselves and accepting situations for what they are, but still dealing with them, that's really one of your main messages, is acceptance, correct?
Yes.
And why would you say that is very like a critical part of life, is acceptance? Why would that be?
That's a great question. As much as we don't want to accept that terrible things happen or are happening or have happened or will happen, the only way to action, whatever that might be, is through acceptance. So the only way for me to finally take healing action with my bipolar disorder was for me to accept that it was real and that it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
The only way for me to work through being held up at gunpoint was to go to therapy and talk about and I still don't quite understand why, but talk about the shame that was involved in what happened to me. I think I should, if I had only done this, or if I had only done that. Mm-hmm. But the only way to get through that is to go and actually talk about it and embody the terrible feelings. Mm-hmm. Because as uncomfortable as it is, the way, the path to acceptance is through that. And then the path to healing. And I think, you said something earlier about, yes, we all experience trauma. We all have traumas. We all will experience trauma. And as we go through the life cycle, we accumulate traumas. Mm-hmm. And that is very, very, very true. And I think that the way that we build resilience is by taking these little leaps of acceptance each time we have something that has to be worked through, to say, okay, I radically accept that this happened, and I hate it, and it's horrible, and me saying I accept it doesn't mean that I am, checking it off or saying like, yes, that's great. But it means that I am kind of at one with right now. And right now is that thing happened. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does, because if I understand it correctly, it's like saying, I'm not okay with it, but I accept that it happened. Or, it also makes me think of an experience I had where I was holding on to needing an apology from someone. And I just had to accept that I may never get that apology, and I just need to move on. But I held on to, they're going to need to apologize for what they did. And the answer is, no, they don't. And you may never have this apology. And for your own sake, accept it and move on. And that's just, compared to other types of traumas, that's just the very first thing that came to mind. But it doesn't mean you're okay with it.
And that's when I start talking about acceptance to my clients, sometimes that's the pushback, is like, but I don't accept it. And in fact, if I did accept it, that would mean giving in, or that would mean giving up, or that that would mean condoning what this terrible thing that happened. And actually, it's the opposite. We're not condoning it at all. But it's holding you hostage. It's keeping you imprisoned. And so the way to open those prison doors is to say, okay, I accept that this happened.
Right. And some trauma can be far more severe than others, because when it comes to trauma, I don't think it's fair to compare, because everyone's traumas are different, right? And even within one's own life, it's amazed me sometimes in my own life what situations I would perceive as being more traumatic than others, when one could potentially be far more severe, but I would be more resilient to one and perhaps not another. And I agree, it can handcuff us, just being so stuck in it, I guess would be a good word. And would you say that can also manifest physically? Because this is your area of expertise. Does that would manifest physically as well, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I and it's amazing how, when you ask the right questions, how connected people are to their bodies. When you ask, where are you feeling that in your body, they're like, oh, it's in my chest. And it often surprises even them, like, oh, I didn't realize that was weighing right here, or I didn't realize I had that nauseating twist in my stomach when I was talking about this, until I looked at it. Is there
textbook, this will be felt in a specific place in the body?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No, everybody's different.
Right.
Some people feel stuff like here, like that's their go-to, is it's right here. Other people it's the stomach, other people it's the chest, some people it's the throat. Some people cannot get in touch with their body at all. And
wow.
Those are actually, if someone can't tell me at all what they're feeling in their body, that tells me that they've had pretty significant trauma, because they're dissociated from their body.
Almost like a numbness.
Yeah.
To just about everything.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know that we always realize how things play out in our body. It an ache, a pain can be an ache or a pain, right? But maybe not. And I just believe that the whole body needs to be treated when you feel things. And it takes, immense connection of the body with the mind to recognize things. Do you find that some patients will find that over time, that they are that connected to their bodies, or is this a lifelong thing?
I would say that those that I've been working with for a while, they are much more quickly in touch with what's happening in their body. If we identify a certain target memory or a certain target belief that they have about themselves, they can very quickly say, oh yeah, it's in my chest. Whereas the first few times they might have been like, I don't know, maybe in my chest, I don't know what it feels like. And so they become much more, it's like a language. It's like another language that they learn to speak.
You touched on resilience earlier. And if we're constantly exploring things like that, the mind, the body, how things sort of play out, you've mentioned that over time we can become more resilient, recognizing sort of what you just mentioned now. And then it made me think, because I heard this on a different interview you did, it made me think of how we even build confidence, right? We just get better over time, recognizing triggers to trauma. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Because that resilience is I always think about confidence after I think about resilience. Maybe, may not be, but it made me think of that. Has that been part of the experience as well? For sure.
Yeah. It makes me think too about suffering, and this sort of Buddhist philosophy of to be human is to suffer. And how do we move through our lives with all of this suffering around us from the day we're born? And
True.
some of us, yes, we're in different parts of the world, we're in different experiences, but we all suffer. And what are the practices that we can learn to do to not reduce our suffering, because that's like active with the suffering, but to begin to detach from the suffering. And that's why I love EMDR so much, because of the desensitization aspect, that we're not going in there and like taking the memory out and throwing it away, but we're going in and saying, okay, this thing that's like a 10 out of 10 in pain, we're gonna try to desensitize it down to a 0. So you still remember it, but it doesn't cause you suffering.
Right.
About it.
Right.
But in general, we all suffer. And how do we build resilience? I think we do that through the exposition of our lives, right? Through creativity, whatever that is for someone, through moving our bodies. Our bodies were meant to be moved. Through using our voices. However, we are meant to do that in this world. You're a musician, I'm a writer. Other people are, we have preachers, and we have politicians, and we have human rights activists. We're all using our voices in a different way.
Can you explain EMDR for us?
Yes. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So EMDR says that by stimulating both sides of the brain through bilateral stimulation, which could be back and forth eye movement, it could be tapping across the body, it could be holding buzzers that buzz back and forth in your hands, basically anything that goes back and forth. Both and the idea is that you're simulating REM sleep, because that's in our sleep. REM sleep is when we are processing our day. So this is processing trauma material, And there's the desensitization aspect. So we return again and again to the traumatic material, bilaterally stimulate both sides of the brain, with the point being that we are trying to desensitize something down to a zero. And people can read about it online. There's plenty of online information. EMDR, EMDR.com is, it's a training site, but it also has like layman's terms, comprehensive overview of what EMDR is.
That's amazing work. When you started in your profession, how long before you moved into that type of treatment? And what led you there, right? Like, how did you choose that path?
Yeah, I think I had been doing trauma-related treatment for 5 or 6 years, and I knew about EMDR, but it's an expensive training, and so I happened to be at an organization that paid for me to do the training. So I had that opportunity, but I had always wanted to do it because I knew that just sitting and talking about trauma only does so much, but to bring in the mind-body approach just takes it to that next level of being able to process and I think the desensitization is part of acceptance. And so that kind of repeated acceptance of, okay, this happened, and eventually it just, the distress isn't there anymore. I knew that potential existed for my clients, but I wasn't able to give that to them until I took the training. So I'm really glad that I did. I'm about to be certified, which is kind of silly because I've been able to be certified for like years, but it's just been, prioritizing putting it in the mail.
Sure.
So
you've got a lot going on.
I do.
I mean, again, going to being kind to ourselves, right? And I think that's when we're in a healthy space too, right? When we've got all of these interests, I think that is a good place to be, right? Because when you don't have interest, or you have interest but you're struggling to be in that place with them, I think that makes it pretty difficult. So the fact that you can work on everything is kind of incredible. How satisfied are you with EMDR? And I know you're about to complete the certification, but how gratifying is that when you're working with your patients?
It's always gratifying because I just feel so incredibly honored to get to be part of people's healing. I would say, I work with people with complex PTSD, and so I'm always looking for ways to make EMDR feel more natural for people who have these really high trauma loads. So I think some of the gratification is in being able to be nimble and creative. Like, one of the ways that you can do bilateral stimulation is through sound. And so a lot of my clients now, I have them just on YouTube, there's like EMDR music, and they can wear a headset and have the bilateral stimulation happening, going back and forth from one side of the ears to the other. There are clients that, until I figured that out with them, couldn't tolerate the other ways that we were trying to do the bilateral stimulation. And so some of it is just like discovering what is going to work for somebody. And that's like a bulk of the of the journey. And then once you
Right.
figure it out, it's like, okay, now we've got this, we can go. But it's all part of it. It's all part of it.
Right. Because no two traumas are the same. No two people are the same. And, I've just in being human and being a person, I've learned that you can speak to someone, two people, perceivably the same types of trauma. It's not the same, and they don't have the same response to it. And I can imagine that can be challenging and gratifying for you at the same time as, and I'm sure you got into this to help people, right? But just having to pivot in different ways, even though you would think it's the same type of, experience that they had, but it's not. But and I guess that takes you to the book that you're working on now, right? Is a victim of sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is not like this one thing you put in a box. It's a different experience for everyone, a horrific experience, but perhaps not horrific in the same way for everyone. And that's a great narrow way to go, Caitlin, by the way, to really bring it down. I just, as I was talking about it, I realized, it's almost like would you say it's like a guidebook to how to maybe process the experience, unpack it a little?
Yeah, so there's going to be kind of reflective questions and then journal prompts.
Thanks for your interest in sticking around to watch or listen to my podcast, dedicated to providing tools and resources to help you claim and live your best life. If you're loving these conversations, make sure you hit that bell to subscribe or follow and never miss an episode of the Chris Senise Podcast. Don't forget to tap the like and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration today. Let's grow this community of curious, driven minds together.
Going back to In Our Blood, how important would you say, or even critical, would you say it's critical to address trauma when you're thinking about having children? Do you think it makes a difference? Do you think it's helpful in perhaps not passing on some generational trauma? Is that a thing? Would you say that's a thing?
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think everybody always thinks it's not going to happen to me, but there's the trauma, and then there's also the way that you respond to the trauma, because another really difficult truism of parenthood is that our kids are going to get traumatized. As much as we try to protect them,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to happen because they're human beings too, and they're on their own journey of suffering
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So it's not so much, obviously we have to protect our kids, and
Sure.
we should. But it's not so much what is the trauma that affects our kids, but how do we handle what happened? How do we talk with our kids about what happened? How do we help them become more resilient? How do we help them, get into profession, get connected to a professional that might help them? But like my son's theater program, that's been hugely healing for him. I know that's part of his healing process, and it's and so even though we are scraping the bottom of the barrel to be able to pay for this college, it's vital.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's something as a parent that I feel really good about providing and being able to provide, because this is his way of working through and also just getting in touch with his creative side and
Mm-hmm.
and a career that he wants to do.
Right. Yeah, I have 2 children, Both are adults, and and your child's an adult. It is amazing to me the things that pop up in adulthood in them, and they are fantastic people. We always talk, my husband and I always talk about how, at the end of the day, what's really great about them is that they're just good people. But, you have to face the reality when they become adults, or maybe even a little younger. You have to face the reality that you were not the only person who influenced them in their lives, because they were not the only people you're not the only people they were exposed to. And I do think that we see things that unfold in them as adults that you're like, did I see that when they were younger? I didn't expect that. But, again, I think for adults, I think it's important when you're planning on being a parent to address the traumas in your life. I know it was helpful for me in certain things, but you'd recommend that?
Absolutely.
That was a whole lot of, trauma dumping, if that's what it was. But, I think of kids, so
I
you
know.
want to take such good care of them, and you're not the only one in their lives.
Yeah. And then when you are in it with them, it's so overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like, how was it for you, right? Because it's like therapist and mom. Do those even weave with your own child?
I don't think so. I mean, I definitely had my own challenges as a mom, that the therapist part of me would have been like, hey, you should work on this. But, like our younger son, today's his 20th birthday. He had a lot of signs of ADHD as a younger child, and we chose to not really do anything about it, to just kind of, oh, well, he'll grow out of it. And he didn't. And I wish, this is something I'm still working through, is like, I can't go back and do something different, as much as I wish I could. But what I can do is work with him now and let him know that, we love him. We think that he's fantastic. And we're going to help him figure it out, because it has affected him.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think the best advice we were given with our son who was diagnosed ADHD was in terms of medication, because we did try to do a more holistic approach, was if he was diabetic, you wouldn't keep him off medication.
Right.
And we got that advice very early on. And I think that's where we went, okay, that makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense that way. But yeah, these are challenges that happen. I'm sure it's, again, humanizing your profession, right? You're a person too, right? You have your own challenges as a person and with your children, and it's you're human too.
We are human too, and life is hard. So, back to your question about, like, what would I say to somebody who's maybe suffering and looking, is like, find a safe harbor, whatever that looks like, whatever that feels like. Doesn't matter if it's a therapist or a choir or, a writing group, anything, a quilting circle, like, just find that safe harbor where you can let down a little bit and get regulated.
Thanks for your interest in sticking around to watch or listen to my podcast, dedicated to providing tools and resources to help you claim and live your best life. If you're loving these conversations, make sure you hit that bell to subscribe or follow and never miss an episode of the Chris Senise Podcast. Don't forget to tap the like and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration today. Let's grow this community of curious, driven minds together.